The Code Navigator is a context-sensitive tool that allows you to identify and examine the style rules that affect a particular part of the page. By default, Dreamweaver displays a little ship's wheel icon if there's no activity in Design View or Code View for a few seconds. To launch the Code Navigator, click the icon. But if you took my advice earlier in this course to disable that icon by selecting this Disable Indicator checkbox at the bottom right of the Code Navigator, of course you won't see the icon and you won't be able to click it. So I've now selected Disable Indicator. We'll click Away, and the way to open the Code Navigator once you've disabled the indicator is to hold down the Alt key on Windows or the Command and Option keys on a Mac, and then click the element you want to inspect. That launches the Code Navigator and it displays a list of selectors that affect the current element. They're displayed in the same order as the cascade, so the style rule that affects the element the most is at the bottom. So the H1 selector is what's actually affecting the heading that I've just clicked. This is the exact opposite of what is displayed in the computed section of the selectors pane in the CSS Designer. Let me click away and move to a different part of the page to demonstrate that. I'm going to hold down the Alt key on Windows, Command Option key on a Mac, and click in this paragraph in the intro article. That's given me the rules that affect this particular part of the page. Intro is at the bottom in the Code Navigator. If you look in the computed section of the selectors pane of the CSS Designer, Intro is listed at the top. This group selector, article aside, header, etc., is listed one above, whereas it's the second one there. Wrapper is the third one down here. It's the third one from the bottom in the Code Navigator. This isn't a bug, it's just the way the two different tools were designed. The Code Navigator follows the order of the CSS cascade, putting the most important rule at the bottom. But the CSS Designer puts the most important at the top. It's just something you need to be aware of if you plan to use both tools for inspecting your CSS. But the Code Navigator doesn't simply display a list of style rules. If you mouse over one of the style rules, it shows you the style definitions in that rule. And if we go over this one, we see the style definitions for wrapper, and over here the style definitions for intro. And these are actually links. If you want to make a change to any of those style rules, just click the link. It opens split view and it puts the insertion point directly in that style rule, ready for editing. I've shown you the Code Navigator in Design View, but it also works in Code View. Let's switch to Source Code, and I need to scroll to the left there. And if I just click anywhere inside one element, hold down the Alt key on Windows, Command Opt on a Mac, click, it shows me the style rules that affect that particular part of the page. And if I do it again up here, holding down the Alt key, and there we get the rules that affect the figure which is inside the teaser class. The Code Navigator also works in Live View, but I think you'll agree that after seeing the way that it works in Code View, this is aimed mainly at people who are really happy working directly with code. The Code Navigator duplicates some of the functionality of the CSS Designer, but if you're really comfortable working directly with the CSS properties and values in a style sheet, it can be an extremely useful tool for inspecting styles in context and then editing them. To avoid the ship's wheel indicator constantly getting in the way, I recommend selecting the Disable Indicator checkbox in the Code Navigator and using the keyboard shortcut. On Windows, hold down the Alt key. On a Mac, hold down the Command and Option keys and click the element you want to inspect.